And joining us today in our Book Talk segment, great to welcome a man who's written a book called Shortcut, How Analogies Reveal Connections, Spark Innovation, and Sell Our Greatest Ideas. He's a former presidential speechwriter for Bill Clinton, has also done a lot of communications consulting work, and he joined us by telephone now. John Pollack is our guest. And John, good to talk to you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good to have a chance to chat with you. I read through the book. I've always kind of been interested in language and all that kind of thing. I guess we all are if we're in this kind of business, but that really was or is your livelihood, particularly when you write for presidential speeches. You got to be pretty exact in what you're trying to get across, right?
It's true. I mean, there are a lot of speeches in the world, and there's a lot of competition for people's ears and their time and their attention and ultimately their commitment to different issues. So the more effectively you can write analogies, the more likely you are to be able to explain things in a way that people relate to.
How difficult, I guess, is that nowadays? I suppose you want to be original, but I guess there's only so many analogies you can make, right, that are original?
Well, you're right in one sense, because there are a lot of cliches that get used. Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Oh, you're coming out of left field. Oh, you're opening Pandora's box, and sometimes people tune those out. But throughout history and even today, people who are really good at analogy and see new connections and help others see those connections can make a big impact. And if you want, I can give you a great example in the computer desktop. For example, when Steve Jobs introduced that concept to the public in 1984 when he unveiled the Mac, at that time, computers were hard to use. Very few people used them. You had to be a techie. But he said, listen, with a Mac, if you can use a desktop with scissors and file folders, and you can use a computer. And he flipped that desktop. He made it, took it from horizontal to vertical, from physical to digital, and suddenly people said, oh, I know how to use a desktop. I can use a computer desktop. And suddenly millions and then ultimately billions of people could put computers to work, and it completely changed the world. And he made that analogy of the desktop and made that switch possible for people.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that there was a day when you just did things on typewriters or even just wrote on a yellow pad.
You're absolutely right. And what's interesting, of course, is that the printing press itself, Gutenberg invented it using analogies. His dad was in the coin manufacturing business, and so he looked at these coins and he thought, oh, that's a lot like you could adapt those to make movable type, and indeed that's what he did. And he took a paper press that was used to press water out of paper pulp to make sheets of paper one by one, and he thought, well, what if you use that you put in this movable type and you use it to press liquid into paper, namely ink. And he took the world from a time when every single document had to be copied by hand, and therefore there weren't a lot of them, to the mass production and the mass distribution of ideas, and the whole progress of science and literature took off from there.
Yeah,
all through analogy.
The scribes, that was a job back then. Just somebody would physically write things down for other people. That was a job.
Yeah, that was a job. And in fact, the scribes were very upset with this innovation. Yeah, because it was going to put them out of work. In the end, of course, it created new and different jobs. But when the salesmen for Gutenberg showed up in Paris, the scribes union had them hauled before a judge, and they said no one could make so many perfect copies without the help of the devil.
So one of the more important ones politically, although it didn't quite work out the way probably it was originally thought, domino theory. I know you talk about that in the book, had to do a lot with the Vietnam War and all that. So that was an important one, although it had negative outcome, didn't it?
Yeah, because the reality is that sometimes analogies ring true, but turn out not actually to be true. And the domino theory was the idea that President Eisenhower first put forward in a press conference off the cuff when a reporter asked him why did the struggle against communism in Vietnam matter, and he said, look, it's like dominoes. If you tip one over, the next one goes, and you can be sure that the last one is going to tip over if the French don't stop the communists, if we don't help them in Vietnam. Then Laos goes, and Cambodia goes, and Thailand goes, and pretty soon the communists are at our doorstep. And it took a geopolitical concept that was a long ways away and kind of complicated, and put it into terms that your everyday American could understand and accept. And indeed that generated support for a gradual escalation of our involvement in Vietnam, and that analogy, the domino theory as it soon came to be called, governed our whole approach there for many, many years. We lost 50,000 soldiers, killed a lot of Vietnamese, spent billions of dollars in it, and the analogy was wrong. And we know this because after we lost, the other countries didn't fall over like dominoes because they're not dominoes.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to be careful about the analogies we accept, because the consequences of accepting them can have a big impact over time.
Now, not everybody's going to be a speechwriter or maybe write advertising copy and that kind of thing. How can the average person apply these techniques maybe to their life or to their job to help them?
Well, everybody uses analogies all the time, and you might not realize it, but once you start paying attention to the analogies you encounter, you start to see them everywhere. And usually in any dispute or argument, the person with the best analogy wins, because they're sort of like that kick at the end of the Karate Kid where he has to do it off one leg. There's no response to the perfect analogy. And so people can get better at analogies, and I say the most important thing they can do is question the analogies that you hear, because when somebody makes an analogy, they're making an argument, they're pushing a point of view, and it might be right, it might be perfectly valid, but it might not. And so we need to ask ourselves, when we hear an analogy, what about that analogy doesn't work? How are these two things different? Why are the parallels not valid? And once you do that, then you'll start making more informed, smarter, better decisions.
Yeah, there's more people now are doing writing as far as on Twitter and Facebook and whatever. I guess that is more people are writing than maybe before. Maybe not better, but this can help them, right, get their point across better.
Absolutely, and it can help us become better, smarter citizens too. Because I mean, you think about politics, and you hear politicians make a lot of claims, and you need to think about them critically. Now take a recent example in Iowa. There's been a lot of attention paid to the Republican candidate, who's Joni Ernst, who made a really appealing, funny analogy, saying, "I grew up on a farm castrating hogs. Send me to Washington, and I'll cut pork." And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, it's funny, and you kind of get the parallel between a hog farm and the mess in Washington. But of course, if you look at the skills involved in castration and the skills involved in negotiating compromise, which is what politics is about, I can't think of a single senator who would say, okay, yeah, just take off one ball.
The name of the book is Shortcut, How Analogies Reveal Connections, Spark Innovation, and Sell Our Greatest Ideas. We've been talking with John Pollack today. Wish we had more time, John, but do you have a website people can get a hold of the book or get a hold of you?
Sure, yeah, you can go to johndpollack.com, JOHNDPOLLACK, johndpollack.com, or you can get the book on Amazon. It's called Shortcut.
Great. Fascinating read, and again, helpful for anybody that does any type of writing. And John, appreciate the time today. Hopefully we can do it again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.